Oh, you read my mind. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay.
Should I just start?
Please.
अनुद्वेगकरं वाक्यं सत्यं प्रियहितं च यत् स्वाध्यायाभ्यसनं चैव वाङ्मयं तप उच्यते.
No, it didn't come up on my screen.
Oh yeah, I couldn't share in time.
That's all right. It's all right. Doesn't matter. And English?
Speech which causes no excitement and is truthful, pleasant, and beneficial, and the practice of the study of the Vedas, these constitute the austerity of speech.
All right. So we're talking about Vach, speech. I find the best paradigm, best guidance for speech, to just condense it all, comes from the Buddhist tradition. Let's see if I can remember them. Is it kind? Is it truthful? Is it timely? Is it necessary? I really like those. Did I get them right, those of you who've studied some Buddhism? So when we're in conversation with people, I think it's a very good guideline. Is it kind? Is it truthful? Is it timely? Is it necessary? Sometimes it can be truthful, but it's not timely or necessary. Then swadhyaya was the term I think he used, right?
Yeah.
Which Swamiji translates as study of the Vedas. I have gotten an additional translation of that term. In the Shankara tradition, we usually think of swadhyaya as our own study of the scriptures. So Swamiji would always say after a camp would be finished, let's say we're doing an Upanishad, we're doing, say, Kaivalya Upanishad. And then he would say, go home and revise it yourself. That was his way of saying, review it, study it yourself, study it with his commentary, study it with what you heard in the camp, and think about it. And most importantly, medha. Who can remember what medha is? Key memory. Key memory. It not only means to be able to remember the verses, but more importantly, when the appropriate life situation comes up, to remember to apply the teaching. This is all part of the Shankara interpretation of Swadhyaya. So let's say you read in Geeta in the second chapter. They have a beginning and an end, these bodies of the embodied. Why grieve over the inevitable? Well, it means not just physical bodies, but all life situations. So how are we doing with letting go of things in our lives? Let's see. Something gets taken out of our lives in some way. Do we remember the teaching? That's what's going to happen. Or do we forget? So it's one thing when Jim says, who knows what this word means, and you can parrot it back. That's a start. But far more important, can you apply the teaching at the important point in our lives? This is all part of the Shankara understanding of Swadhyaya. Now, Patanjali and the commentators of the Raja Yoga tradition have another definition of Swadhyaya, meaning literally self-study with a small s. So it basically means developing the habit of a personal inventory of our strengths and challenges. Socrates talked about this. Who's heard his famous saying, the unexamined life is not worth living? Most people are completely unconscious of their own psychological material, what motivates them, and most importantly, what afflicts them, what gets them in trouble. Most people run around with what I call a victim attitude. I'm unhappy and they did it to me. We never think to look at what's my part in this? What are my thought processes? What energy am I putting out that's causing the same kind of dynamic to repeat itself in my life? Lots and lots of techniques to help with this other kind of swadhyaya. Who here has a regular practice of journaling? It's an excellent way. Get it from between your ears onto a piece of paper. Get some clarity with it. If you go to a psychotherapist, that's a form of swadhyaya, where your issues go from the unconscious into the conscious space. Oh, that's what that triggers me. I see. And the inventory is not always done in red ink. We also want to have a clear, honest understanding of what are my strengths. So, are you good at management? Are you a good organizer? Do you have creative energy? Or like, for example, in my old field of singing, of music, you're never going to be a good singer if you don't love your own voice. Jim, that sounds like vanity. No, that's an honest appraisal. I studied in the mid 80s with a famous world-class Hellman tenor, heroic tenor, who sang at the Metropolitan, who sang at Bayreuth, he sang Wagner. And in my lesson, once he sang this phrase with this gorgeous high note, then he stopped and said, "Oh, that gave me goosebumps." And it was like he was talking about someone else's voice. Just an objective analysis of his own sound. It wasn't vain. It was just honest appraisal of our strengths as well as our challenges. And this is swadhyaya. Now, along this line of strengths, the Gallup industry put out this process called Strength Finders. Any of you done the Strength Finder inventory at work? You heard of it?
Yeah, I've done it. Yeah.
I did it. I did it at my church job. Fascinating. The theory behind it is, rather than spending our time looking at what our weaknesses are and then trying to improve them a whole lot, you look at what your strengths are and put the energy in to maximizing those. It's fascinating. I won't go into how they figured all this out. You can just Google it and find it. But it's important to be able to look at both. So it was swadhyaya,
Yeah.
abhyas. Is that what he said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Practice. Practice. Unfortunately, armchair grace doesn't work in yoga. Oh, the guru's going to do it all. God's going to do it all. I'm just going to sit here. In an earlier chapter, Krishna says a person raises him or herself into the self by themselves, not lower themselves. The term is paurusham or purushartha, self effort. Now, I love what the great saint Augustine of Hippo said. Pray like it all depends on God, and work like it all depends on you. So we cooperate with grace. We have our part to do. Now, let's break this down a bit. Swamiji was giving a camp once, and he said something that seemed very outrageous at first. He says, in the American Constitution, it says all men are created equal. It's not true. Some people are more intelligent, others are less. Some are born with more privilege and money, some with less. Some have more talent, some have less. Now, he didn't go into what it means as we're equal under the law, but what he did say, we're all equal in one area only. Who can figure out, who can guess what it is?
We all have the same amount of time.
Yes. Everybody gets 24 hours in a day. Nobody gets 25, and nobody's cheated and gets 23. So the question really is, what are you going to do with the time that's given you? Why is this important? One of the great laws of karma, the end is the cause in a different form. So if you spend all your time playing video games, and what you want to do is be a writer, what will happen over time is you'll be good at video games. You will not be a writer. Why? Because that's not where you spent your time. And it's the same with the spiritual life. Oh, I want liberation. But I just can't seem to get myself to meditate. I really want it. I watch YouTubes. But do I have abhyasa? Do I have a practice? What practice should I do, Jim? That depends on the texture of your mind. Talk to me offline. I'll see if I can help you. Basically, commit time on a daily basis, significant time, to your spiritual practice. whatever it is. I don't mean read daily reflections for 5 minutes while you're on the toilet.
Read what?
Some book, I just made it up. Daily reflections, meditation of the day while you're on the toilet. That's not a practice. A little feel good stuff. I mean, read some scripture and meditate. Watch your mind. Do manana, think about it. Through the day, put your practice as your intention through the day. Spend a minimum of 20 minutes a day. You can put an hour in on your spiritual life in the morning. That's good. Many of you spend more than an hour a day watching television. Many of you spend more than an hour a day on your telephone. No blame. It's not a moral issue. But you get out of life what you put into it. The end is the cause in a different form. You want to be a really good tennis player, watching television won't get you there. You want to play tennis. You want to work out and be buffed, watching Game of Thrones won't get you there. Gotta go to the gym. Any thoughts on this? I had a young man who's coming to me, and he wanted to be a professional singer. He's really talented, has a good voice. So his game plan was to work as a school administrator until he saved enough money so that he could really then go into his music career. He was at that time in his late 20s. What I said to him, if you spend the next 10 years as a school administrator saving up money, in 10 years, you'll probably be a senior level school administrator, but you won't be a professional singer. If you want to be a singer, sing. Put your life, your time, your abhyasa, your practice it. And here, of course, the intimation is put it into your spiritual life. Any thoughts, any questions? What's the next idea in this verse?
It talks about how like the abhyas should be of the Vedas.
Yes, meaning do it of the practices that our scriptures suggest. Don't make up your own yoga. A lot of people now are doing that. They're deciding what it is that's going to be their yoga. We're doing pink tantra. We're doing breath work and sexual freedom. That's how we're going to get to God. Ayahuasca journeys, that's the latest thing that's going to do. No, you want to have a valid pramana, a valid means of knowledge. Now, Advaita Vedanta, the Jnana Yoga path in which I'm trained, is not the only one. There are many, many valid means of knowledge. But find a valid means of knowledge. Any thoughts or questions on this? Next idea?
It also talks about how your speech shouldn't cause any excitement. It should be truthful, pleasant, and beneficial.
Yes, and we talked about what I think is a good guideline for right speech.
That's it.
That's it. Next verse.
Mana prasada samyatvam maunamatma vinigraha bhava samshuddhirityeta tapomana samuchyate. Serenity of mind, good-heartedness, silence, self-control, purity of nature. These together are called the mental austerity.
Yes. So at the level of the mind, let's go through each one. What was the first one?
So in English, it says serenity of mind, but the Sanskrit says mana prasada.
So the gift of a mind, serenity of mind.
So, and then it goes on to say saumyatvam, which is serenity of mind.
Yes. So the gifts of the mind. The first one is serenity.
Mhm.
Serenity. Make peace of mind your most prized possession. I was watching a thing on PBS the other night about some big great house in Britain. I can't remember the name of it. And the news person said, well, if there were a fire, what is it that you would grab? What's the most precious thing? And there was this beautiful, it was a Chinese carving or something like that was his favorite or something like that. So in your home, what's your most prized possession? Is it an animal, a child? Is it the hard drive? Is it photos? Is it jewelry? But we need to make serenity of mind our most prized possession. And most of us treat it cheaply. We're willing to squander it over an unkind word or a scowl. Now, some of us, perhaps many of us, have this very, very strange practice. So if you're in a room of 100 people, 9 of them like you, 90 of them don't give a damn, and 1 of them doesn't like you. Guess which one we obsess over? You can actually be attached to Dvesha. Dvesha is aversion. Do you spend your time thinking about, obsessing over, reviewing unpleasant conversations, interactions, or fights you've had with people in the past? That's an attachment. Nobody has the power to make us feel anything. I let it in. I decide to give them the power to do that. So make peace of mind the most prized possession. No event, no circumstance, no relationship is more important than your serenity. Any thoughts on this? Now, I'm not saying run away from life. Doesn't mean we have to get upset about it. Next idea.
Good-hearted.
Yeah. In the end, I think it's really important. Try not to be a jerk. Yeah. Try to be good-hearted. Try to love people. Try to be tolerant. Try to forgive. How many times should I forgive my neighbor? Jesus was asked. Scripture says 7 times. Jesus said, I say, forgive your neighbor 7 times 70. So we endeavor to practice love and tolerance, kind-heartedness. Next idea.
Silence.
Maunam. The word muni, who can tell me what muni means?
Sage.
A sage, but it comes from the same root as maunam. A muni is one with a silent mind. So we don't mean here an obnoxious practice of running around with a notepad, writing down and trying to communicate without saying anything like that, annoying everybody around you. But you might have, let's say, on your day off, give yourself the practice, I'm not going to speak until lunchtime. Or another practice, we don't speak unless someone inquires something of us. Now, here's another practice of Maunam that I love. Give yourself the practice to go for a week without giving your opinion unless someone asks for it. Now, what many find when they do it, nobody asks for your opinion. I thought that was so important and I had so much to contribute to any conversation, etc., etc. You know, and in fact, people get along just fine without our opinions. It's incredibly revelatory. If you can, set aside a few days to be in silence. See how speech and mind are connected, how your thinking starts to slow down. Who here's ever practiced extensive amount of silence for a period? Let's do Deepa first. What was your experience with it?
I did Vipassana a couple of times, but the first 3 days, it's like the brain vomits up everything that you've been storing at a shallow level. And then the next 4 days, your subconscious starts throwing up stuff that you haven't thought about. But then the mind plays like a trickster game that tries to engage you in externalities over and over and over. And then you start using other senses to see if you can find a sense of connection or validation, or I don't know, in the food line or something. And then after 6 days, I think the mind just gives up. And
you're lucky. Some of us don't get there in just 6 days. You did well. How about you? Did you have your hand up, Santosh?
I did, yeah.
Tell us about your experience with it.
It was actually during COVID, during the lockdown. We were isolated. a number of days where I didn't speak to anyone.
No texting?
Oh, well then I can't have to put my hand back down.
That's not novel.
Okay.
That's still speech. So it's a wonderful practice. And, don't be obnoxious about it. What it does is help us quieten the mind. All right, next idea.
Self-control,
What's the term he uses in the Sanskrit? Do you know?
Atma Vinigraha.
Okay. Vinigraha, to buying back, to control. So in here, Atma, the word Atman in Gita is used contextually. Sometimes it means the supreme self. Sometimes it means the subtle body. Sometimes just the individuality, or like even the body. So here it means self-control, meaning we're able to discern the difference between Shreyas and Preyas. So in Kathopanishad, little Nachiketas goes to the realm of Lord Death, Yamaraj, Yamaraj, my tongue gets tangled, who's out of station, is one what you would say. He's off doing cholera epidemics or something like that. So poor Nachiketas has to wait 3 days with no food or drink outside the palace of Lord Yama. Yama comes back, oh, that's so impolite. So impolite. So he gives him boons. Last of the 3 boons, Nachiketas says, I want to know when a person dies, is he or isn't he? Yamaraj says, don't ask that, don't ask that, don't ask that. Let me give you women, let me give you wealth, let me give you power. Nachiketas says, I want to know. So finally, Lord Yama relents. And the first thing he says to answer the question, 2 paths approach a person, Shreyas and Preyas. The good and the pleasant. Or as Swamiji used to say, the electable and the delectable. So most of us are tyrannized by the indulgent tendencies of mind. I'm just going to do what I want. I call it our inner 2-year-old. I want ice cream. No, I don't want to eat my vegetables. We carry that voice in our heads, screaming voices of raga and dvesha. So these need to be controlled. Earlier, Krishna will use the term yoga rudha. Yoga arudha. Arudha is a riding term. It means to mount a horse. So to mount the steed of the mind. So I am no longer at the effect of my impulses. I think modern psychologists would say impulse control. Only when we are not tyrannized by that can we begin to get in touch with the deep intuition, start to move toward what's good for us. Now, I have some good news for you. The mind interprets the habitual as pleasant. So, if you commit yourself to the spiritual life, to practice, eventually you start to desire the good. It's very, very cool. Then that same engine that drove you into drugs, sex, and rock and roll start to drive you towards the infinite. Towards the infinite. So we practice choosing the good. If you don't know what's good for you, you go to scripture. Many, many places. Good place to start. Yamas, niyamas, the Raja Yoga tradition. Qualifications of a fit student in the Vedanta tradition. Go to Geeta. These are laid out. Next idea.
Purity of nature.
Yes. Now, purity here, we have to be careful. It doesn't mean being a goody-goody. I was working with a young man this past week who is struggling to recover from drug addiction. He's Indian, and he comes from a Jain family. But his understanding of it is all these harsh austerities. If you enjoy it, you can't do it. You know, whatever it is that you enjoy, you're not supposed to enjoy anything. And believe me, there are equally crazy schools in Western thought too. I don't frankly believe that's really what Jainism as a world religion teaches. Is this guy's adolescent understanding of it. Of course, he rebelled against it. So what we give up, what we choose to do, we need to do with a sense of insight. Suppression never works. If you suppress stuff, in time it's going to come out sideways. We let things go. We develop purity through insight. Let me give you an example. So I have a friend, and she's now in her 30s. But for 25 years, she did not know she had celiac disease. You all know what celiac disease is? When you're gluten intolerant, not just sensitive, but intolerant. And she went to all sorts of doctors. She's Indian. Indians, by and large, don't get celiac disease. It's quite rare. It's a genetic condition, but she's got it. And finally, she got tested. Oh, that's what the problem is. That's what's causing all these stomach aches. It's gluten. So once she understood the problem, she knew she had to give up gluten foods. She wanted to not have a tummy ache. It was hard in the beginning, but she was able to do it. She was motivated by insight. What do I mean? She could see the connection between what she was doing and her suffering. I was talking with a woman, brand new friend, I met Friday. Not a yogi, but she goes through a whole lot of vodka every day. And her basic thought process is, if you had my problems, you'd drink too. She's disaffected from her husband. He's a really nice guy, but I can't stand him, she said. Her children are disaffected from her. She has no friends. She feels alone and alienated and worthless as a human being. She says, I feel invisible. Nobody can see me. She does not yet understand that all those conditions are caused by the alcoholism. She thinks the alcohol is the solution to those problems. It's delusion. Most of us suffer under that to a more socially acceptable degree. We don't understand what's causing my suffering. So, the toughest to do, see what happens if you put the plug in the jug and stop drinking. See what happens if you give up the donuts. All of a sudden, people see, oh, I didn't realize that's what was causing my suffering. So how do we achieve purity? Not through willpower, not through some externally imposed moral precept. My parents said to do this, my religion says to do that. You won't ever stick. Or if you do it, you'll be one of these prune-faced people that's very proud of your austerity. I'm purer than anybody I know. Like, I'm so pure, I don't let anybody touch my food. We've known people like that. No, we give stuff up when we begin to see that it's causing me to suffer. That's how purity is achieved, through insight. What is it we need to see? Very simple, and everybody misses it. Such is the power of Maya. What's it feel like to want stuff you don't have? It hurts. Setting physical pain aside, can you find any other suffering other than wanting something you don't have? Or the inverse, I want to be rid of something I can't stand. Or the neurotic form, I have what I want, but I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. Can you find any other suffering? The yogi, it takes a long time to figure out. It isn't because I don't have the stuff. It's because I'm compulsively wanting. It's the wanting that hurts. Getting stuff only temporarily deals with the tyranny of kama, craving, vanja, wanting, spra, longing, sangraha, grabbing attachment. So the yogi sees that's what the problem is, and they begin to enter into a way of life to let go of what's causing my suffering. You get no support for it in the world out there. The world out there is absolutely convinced you're unhappy because you don't have what you want. Yogi sees things differently. So the yogi becomes purer, not out of some idea of moral superiority. But out of being intelligent, insight. And again, a pure mind is not one with goody-goody thoughts. If you have water with vinegar in it, or you have water with sugar in it, both are not pure water. What do you have to do to get pure water? Take out everything that's not water. So this practice of letting go reduces the number of thoughts, the frequency of thoughts, the power of our thoughts. A pure mind is one with fewer or even no thoughts at times. Any thoughts on this? Next one, the next idea.
These together are called the mental austerity.
Yes, next verse.
Shraddhaya paraya taptam tapasthatrividham nare aphala kankshibhir yuktai satvikam parichakshate. This threefold austerity practiced by steadfast men with the utmost faith, desiring no fruit, they call sattvic.
Yes, it's also steadfast women, by the way. Steadfast people. So this is his sattvic shraddha. Those things we've discussed. If you live a life like this, where I'm committed to this path of yoga, this is a sattvic faith. Next idea. Next verse.
Satkaramana pujartham tapodambena chaiva yat kriyate tadiha proktam rajasam chala madhruvam. The austerity which is practiced with the object of gaining good reception, honor, and worship, and with hypocrisy, is here said to be rajasic, unstable, and transitory.
Yes, so for that middle class of people who are in the rajasic state, this is their faith. This is how they move through life. So let's go through each one of these. First idea.
The austerity which is practiced with the object of gaining good reception.
Yes, there's two ways to look at this. So many of us in Hinduism will do puja to manipulate the god so that I can get what I want. You're a college kid and you want to do well on the exam, so you do a prayer to Ganesh. You're starting a business, you want the store to be successful, you install a Lakshmi Murta and you do a Lakshmi Puja to get money. You go to the local astrologer, you get a mantra so you can find a husband or a wife. Getting stuff. Deep and I were chanting about this whole thing, that people who study the science of chanting at one level, it's, how did you call it? It wasn't wish fulfillment. What?
Wish fulfillment, yeah.
Yeah,
Or tantra.
yeah. Getting what you want. Using austerities, prayers, mantras to get stuff. In the end, it's okay. The problem is getting what you want just gets you what you want. It doesn't solve the deep underlying erroneous belief system. Because Ishvara, the Lord, has a sankalpa. No matter how powerful ours is, Ishvara's is more powerful. And his is entropy. All forms without exception fall apart. So whatever it is that you acquire by your sankalpa, by your mantra practice, by your puja, is temporary. And we have to deal with the law of diminishing return. We eat one candy out of the jar and it's enjoyable. But if you eat all the candies in the jar, guess what happens? You meet one person, have a date. Maybe it's a uncle. And it's enjoyable and some intimacy. But if you're on Tinder or Grinder, I don't know, what are some of the other ones?
And Bumble.
You know them all. Anyway, but if you're on them every night, and every night it's a new body part that you're playing with, in the end, it's very empty and very addictive. So it's the great lie of Maya that there's something that's enduring in the world of name and form. The world of name and form, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not evil. It's not bad. No one ever said there's not enjoyment in the world. But it's little, it's temporary, and it always passes. But yourself is infinite. It's always available. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to look your best. Doesn't matter if you're 10 or 20 pounds overweight. And it won't rot your liver. Cannot be abused. And it truly satisfies the human heart. Next idea.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
So when I hold pretty strongly on to the idea of make peace of mind your primary preoccupation, say, right, or your spiritual pursuit. But even that can become a bit of a neurosis, no? Like holding on to even that. Like I think what reminded me of it was your use of sangraha. Grabbing onto, like, say, I want my peace of mind, so I'm going to do this.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit. Peace of mind is another form of your own self-nature. It's not something external. It's the mind freed from its vikshepa shakti. No condition causes peace of mind.
So it's not the kind that depends on something external happening.
Exactly. You get peace of mind by letting go. Real peace of mind, not by, don't bother me, I've got everything in my house, the feng shui is perfect, and the candles are right, and I've got the right incense, and I've got the right music. Don't upset it! That's not peace of mind. Is that making sense?
Actually, I was alluding more to like spiritual practices. Sometimes when you get attached to ritual or mantra, for example, like if I don't do this, then my peace of mind would be affected.
Okay, we can get caught in what I call the Vedanta logic loop.
Huh.
So the Vedanta will say, yes, that's an attachment, you need to give that up. And actually, no. Because those practices are part of your mumukshatva, your burning desire for liberation. This is called subhecha, auspicious desire. And you keep at it until all the rest of your desires have been roasted. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So Shankara has a marvelous image. So you have to imagine the funeral pyre, with a dead body on it. That's your ego. And you're the priest or the one doing the ritual. You've got a big stick. And you need to keep stirring the funeral pyre till that corpse is burnt. Only when the ego corpse is totally burnt, then what do? Then you throw the stick on. So your religious practices, your chanting, your puja, if it's helping you attain purity of mind, if it's bringing you joy, that's going to keep you out of the bars at night. If you know what I mean. If doing that is giving you more joy. So this is why we do these preparatory exercises to purify the head and the heart. So no, don't get it caught up in the Vedanta logic loop. Yes, it is an attachment of a sort. We call that attachment devotion. That's healthy. Now, in the end, Upanishad, I think it's Cana, says it's not that which you worship here. Let it go. It's yourself. But you can't renounce something you don't have. Get firmly devoted to the Lord. Let that devotion to God be part of the engine that pulls your mind out of an addictive relationship with the world. I just want release. Ooh, boy, that reveals so much. What it says is your underlying mind state is low-grade agitation and discontent. Better you spend time chanting than go out, get drunk, and get a whole bunch. Now, there's nothing wrong. Having a drink, getting laid. We do that, we don't have to do it. But while you're doing it, understand, keep in mind what the scriptures have said about the dynamics of pleasure and suffering. I joke with people, but I'm serious about it. Vedanta will ruin your capacity to enjoy the world.
Mhm.
Who's had that experience? You can't do it in ignorance anymore. You can't fool yourself into thinking, oh, I just don't have the right boyfriend or girlfriend. I just don't have the right job. I'm in the wrong city. I'm in the wrong house. I have the wrong car. I'm 10 pounds overweight. It would all be different if I lost 10 pounds. I mean, I make fun of it, but that's the stuff we think about and we believe it. That's a lie. I just have to ask you, how's it working out for you? Has living life from that viewpoint making you happy? No, I'm unhappy. Oh. You're caught in the tyranny. Oh. And getting what you want doesn't resolve tyranny. So in Yoga Vasishtha, there's one story that talks about in the beginning, you spend 2/4 of the mind in worldly enjoyment, 1/4 of the mind in service to the Guru, and 1/4 of the mind listening to the teaching. Then you take 1/4 of the mind in worldly enjoyment, 2/4 of the mind in listening to the Guru, and 1/4 of the mind in selfless service. Can't remember exactly how it goes. Then you spend 1/4 of the mind studying scripture, 2/4 of the mind in mananam meditation, 1/4 of the mind with the Guru. You know, in other words, they imply it's a process. You're not able to give up the world all at once. None of us do. None of us do. No blame. We do stuff till we don't have to do it anymore, till we burn it out, till through insight or painful experience, we quit doing it. But the chanting, the puja, the devotional practices, first of all, they warm the heart. Some of us are just kind of shut down. And they're of value. Now, when we get to the highest levels of meditation, yes, we do. Is that useful?
Yeah.
I think you've heard me use the example of sharpening the knife before you cut the tomato. So chanting, doing puja is part of the knife sharpening, so that the mind is fit for the subtle inquiry and not just having moments of abidance in the self, but so you can stay there. Sthita. What's the next idea?
We went through the austerity, which is practiced with the object of gaining good reception, honor, and worship, and with hypocrisy.
Yes. So many of us, because of social convenience, I come from a Brahmin family. We are, very high. So we go to the Chinmaya mission and we go every Sunday. And we're seen there, our children learning Gujarati and stuff like that. And then you go home and you scream at your kids, and you're a money grubber at work, and you cheat and stuff like that. That's hypocrisy. Many people do it. Next idea.
Is said to be rajasic, unstable, and transitory.
Yes. Yes. Next verse. One more, and then we'll quit.
This shloka is prefaced by off tapas. I think this is Krishna speaking about tapas. So, Mooda grahena mano yad pidaya kriyate tapa parasyot sadhanartham va tattamasa mudahritam. That austerity which is practiced with self-torture out of some foolish notion for the purpose of destroying another is declared to be tamasic.
So this is people who do malpractice, black magic, where you creates tamasic rituals, basically sankalpas, which have as their intention to hurt or harm other people who've hurt or harmed you, or getting caught up in ignorance and doing various kinds of tapas that hurt or destroy your own body, sticking needles through your skin, or sleeping on beds of nails, or starving yourself, thinking that somehow that will help. And it's not just in Hinduism. There's a practice that mostly Jesuits, but I think other orders have practiced, called mortification of the flesh. Do any of you know what a cilia is? Cilia is a metal hoop that monks would put around their thigh that had needles in them. They would tighten it so it hurt and made them bleed. It was the idea the pain will help you get beyond the body. You can look at all sorts of metal devices that monks would put on their genitalia that would like poke it and squeeze it and stuff like that to try to suppress their sexuality. Wearing a hair shirt. Anybody heard that expression? Monks would wear an undershirt under their robes made of usually like goat or cow hair turned in so it would itch all the time. This is stupid. You will not be free from the body by torturing.
Jim, I have a question about this.
Please.
I watched a documentary a few months back about about a very great saint in the Christian tradition, and of course this applies for all traditions, I guess. But in this documentary, the saint, she does undergo a lot of these very difficult sounding austerities, and later on, she becomes a woman of realization and has a very intimate relationship with the Lord and so on. So this made me wonder about the topic we are discussing now, that is it that people who follow those
we're running out of time. We have to stop, but we can talk about this offline. But many Christian saints are known because they love God heroically, and they're made a saint because after they die, people pray to them and miracles happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're realized. So which saint was it?
I think it was Saint Veronica.
Do you remember?
Saint Veronica, I think.
Saint Veronica. Okay, we can talk about this offline, but take it with a grain of salt. First of all, Veronica is way back at the time of Jesus. We know nothing really historical about Veronica.
Okay.
She goes back 2,000 years ago.
Okay.
So what we have is what we call hagiography or hagiography, which are the stories that are told about these people after the fact.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
We can talk about this offline. All right, we need to stop. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Shishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha Hari Hari Om. Om. May not have been Veronica, might have been another one. If you can
No,
find me the